Hey, welcome back to the Ministry Growth Show. Most ministry leaders don't burn out because they stop believing in the mission. They burn out because the work slowly pulls them away from the quiet center where it all began. Today's conversation is for anyone who's felt that drift, anyone who's tired, anyone wondering if there's a way to keep serving without losing yourself in the process. Kristen Welch is the founder of Mercy House Global, a ministry walking with teen mothers in Kenya, refugees and survivors of trafficking in Houston, and vulnerable families around the world. Her story is both beautiful and costly. 15 years in, everything looks successful on the outside. Yet inside, she knew something was breaking. What she shares today is how burnout became the doorway back into intimacy with Jesus and a new way of leading. We get into identity, suffering, letting go of control, community, and what it means to lead from the secret place rather than from exhaustion. If you're carrying the weight of a mission you love, this conversation will speak to you. Kristen Welch, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah. So just for some context and to give our listeners some background, can you share who, and specifically people who are new to Mercy House Global, what need in the world you guys were responding to when the ministry began, and how has that need shaped the way you serve women today?
Well, we are a 15-year-old, I like to think we're still a small startup, nonprofit that serves vulnerable populations, predominantly families, women who are at risk to trafficking, human trafficking, or overcomers of human trafficking. We have maternal health centers in Nairobi, Kenya, where we have brought in teen girls who've gotten pregnant due to human trafficking and help them have their babies and rehabilitate and get back into school. And then we work with vulnerable populations in Houston, where our home base is. And so we really, our mission is to empower vulnerable families with opportunities that create hope. And we do that through just God's love and open doors through friendship and a lot of practical ways like English classes for refugees and internships for overcomers of trafficking, actually maternal health care in Kenya's a whole avenue there. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey. It's been really hard, but it has impacted everything in my life. It's changed the way that I see God, I see myself, and I see people. And so it's really been just the joy of a lifetime to say yes to God and pursue justice on behalf of the vulnerable.
Did you guys start in Nairobi or Houston, or was it both and from the beginning?
So I actually am the founder and started it the U.S. side in 2010 that funds the Nairobi side. We're two separate organizations, but we have been the predominant funder of our work in Kenya. And then we expanded about 4 years in to replicating some of what we were learning, some of what we were doing, the empowering programs with refugee women in our city. And then about 6 years ago, really grew into providing opportunities for overcomers with human trafficking. So that's our newest initiative. And so some of my coworkers, people that I work with every day, have come out of trafficking. And that has really, I think it's shown me just how much we have in common, no matter where you're born, whether you're resourced or not. We're all children of God, and we want to provide for our families, and we want mercy and justice. And so it's really been a unique journey that has invited a lot of people to be involved.
And when you say opportunities, what does that look like?
Well, we have three programs at the organization. We have our global program, which is in Kenya, and that is um, every opportunity you could imagine, from education to counseling, medical help, job creation, skill development. Um, and then in Houston, we that's our local hope program. We have
Mm-hmm.
English classes for refugee women. We have monthly empowerment lunches for vulnerable populations. So we have lunches that provide community and resources and connections to other ministry partners for overcomers of human trafficking. We lead survivor led support groups, um, and we do a lot of job uh, preparedness. So we're a second chance workplace for vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
women in our community. We're trauma informed. We're the largest group of forklift certified women in our county. So we look for practical ways to help a woman who is vulnerable get back into the workforce. Um, and we do that uh, because work it offers dignity. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we really embrace the idea that we could give money to the poor, to the vulnerable, but they would really like to provide for themselves. So we do that through job skills and soft and hard skill certifications, scholarships, a lot of different ways to just come alongside someone who really needs a second chance. Many of the women have there's a lot of stigma in Kenya for teen pregnancy, even though these girls are coming out of trafficking situations.
Mm-hmm.
And in the United States, a lot of women who have been in this vulnerable position have criminal records. It's very difficult for them to get a job. Their children could be in foster care. And then, of course, the refugee population, assimilation in a new country and culture. We start with English and friendship because those are the two things that really open the door um,
Mm-hmm.
eventually for the gospel. So show up and say, we're going to teach you some English lessons and we're just going to love you, be your friends, show you how to navigate the bus system, how to advocate for yourself, how to attend a parent teacher meeting, all of those things.
A forklift certification. That's a new one.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of that.
That's awesome. I love the creativity.
Yeah, so we
So,
have a warehouse. One of the opportunities that we provide in all of our programs, so this is local, global, um, is through we have a fair trade subscription club with
mm,
5 options. So artisan made products from around the country that provide job opportunities for artisans, and then we create room in the market for them. And so we manufacture items in our warehouse and we move them around with a forklift and we pack them by volunteers. And so we have a whole ecosystem of, you know, an idea from creation to made right there in our warehouse by a survivor of human trafficking to a wholesale account where it could go in a store um, and eventually into a shopper's home. And then they have an kind of an entry into, oh, what is Mercy House? And
hmm
hopefully become a donor or a volunteer. Yeah.
so it's primarily used as an introductory tool
Hmm.
to the ministry.
Yes.
Interesting. That's
Yeah.
great. When you guys look back on the early days, what was maybe the moment or the burden Jesus uh, used to confirm this is the work I'm calling you to?
Yeah. That's a whole, I've actually written an entire book about that journey. I'll try to summarize it
Wow.
in a few words. Um, I am a writer by profession, and I was on a trip to Kenya with Compassion International writing about poverty in 2010. And it was really my first exposure to the world's normal. Um, and that was really, it's hard to define what it means when your normal or your bubble burst and you realize the
hmm
rest of the world doesn't live like you do. Um, and so I was just very insulated and, middle class, had young children, thought I was being this, I thought I was doing people a favor by writing their story. And God really used it to rewrite my story and to expose just that I was poor in spirit. Even though I was resourced, I was poor in spirit, or maybe because I was resourced, I'm not sure. But um, I did not function out of Jesus being the center of my life. I added him to my life. And what I
Mm.
really saw in a slum in Kenya, where I saw the poor and they had something I didn't have. They
Mm.
had an intimacy with Jesus that I longed for. And so it was really the beginning of a journey of finding Jesus. And in that, I found myself and I found out how to love my neighbor. And so, when I say a changed life, I mean not just that I shop fair trade now or that I, um, you know, advocate and care for the vulnerable, but really I'm a different person because um, I know Jesus in a more intimate way. And
Mm-hmm.
this was the bridge for me. This was the discovery into the secret place was, um, I mean, Jesus will lead us if we let him. And there's an invitation and he cares for the marginalized. And there's justice for the marginalized. And so I just want to be on that side of the story, the gospel
Mm-hmm.
story, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So as the organization grew, the ministry grew, um, with that usually comes, for most ministry leaders I talk to, uh, busyness and tasks,
Mm-hmm.
and so, especially given what you just shared,
Mm-hmm.
um, with many of us slipping into ministry on autopilot, if you will, what
Mm-hmm.
helps you
Mm-hmm.
return to Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
um, as a person, that intimacy with him that you talked about, not
Mm-hmm.
just a partner in the work, not just a partner in ministry and the mission he's called you to, but, um, making sure that what's most important remains most important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I only know the answer to this because I got it wrong. So that is my full disclosure. Um, it is so easy to slip into believing that God needs us to do something. um, he invites us into it for the transformation that happens in us, right? He doesn't need us to do, he can do anything with
Right.
anyone. We're invited in. And I think the enemy's chief goal is to make us believe that we're good, that we
Mm-hmm.
have what it takes, that we can rely on ourselves, that doing things for God is the same as being with God. That is the
Mm-hmm.
enemy's goal. He wants us, and anything that separates us from God is sin, including the very ministries we start, right? Like anything that separates us from God can be used to distract us and to, achievement and success and the things that our culture applauds are the things that were separating me from God. Um,
Mm.
and so I, uh, I would say probably the first 10 years of the organization, I was running fast and furious. Um, but when you start something from nothing and, the odds of it even continuing are so against you. It's not in your favor to be an English major and a writer and a mom of three kids and start a global ministry on the side, right? Like that is not success. And actually, one time a millionaire who I thought would be this great donor who wasn't asked me what my business plan was. And it was like 2 years into starting the organization. And I was just like, faith, and I didn't really have a business plan. I mean, so I would say I started with the right motive and accepted the invitation from God. And then life happens and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard, right? Like you're, it's a hustle and you're grinding it out and you're doing the best you can with what you have. And life happens and things are unexpected, or, so I just like in this mode for a decade of seeing a lot of success. It's growing, we're continuing. Um, and I think I don't know if I thought I was good at what I did, but I had it down, I think, just
Mm-hmm.
like, here's the rhythm. We grew year over year, did not have one single year of really where we struggled financially until around the time of COVID. Um, and uh, around that time, I started using words like, I'm really tired, I feel burned out, and didn't really listen to my soul. Um, I didn't see, which I do think this is self deception, but I just didn't see where I was really at spiritually. And Henry Nouwen, I don't know if you've ever read anything he's written, but he
Mm-hmm.
says that, or he said that burnout is this convenient psychological term for spiritual death. So I was spiritually dying and I was calling it burnout. But it was
Mm.
because I did everything that looked spiritual, literally. Like, I'm doing all the right things, um, except was not, I didn't have intimacy with Jesus, but I thought I did, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, how do you know, or how does a lobster know it's becoming dinner, right? It doesn't. It's like slow boil. I think that's how I was. And then I went from, I have all the answers, like ask me anything. And I started this organization where people would come to me for every answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would give them the answers as the visionary. And I went from that to, I don't know, I don't have the answer. Like I could not give people. And then the final phase was, I don't care. Like
Mm.
I know all the answers. I don't know anything. And now I just don't care. I was very burned out. And this was 2 years ago, in the beginning of 2023. So almost 3 years ago. Um, and of course it was post COVID, and I'd used the little bit of burst of energy that you have in a sprint. I'd used it
Mm-hmm.
during COVID, and we had a lot of difficult things happen in our organization during that time that had nothing to do with COVID, but we had a fire that burned down one of our maternity homes, and we
Mm.
had a structural collapse of our building in America, and I had 30 employees in the building. A lot of spiritual warfare, and anytime you're pressing into dark places like trafficking rings, and a lot of spiritual warfare. And so
Mm-hmm.
I got to a place where I was like, this is going to kill me. I'm not going to survive this. And what was this beautiful move of God became like a monster in my head where I'm like, it's going to consume me. And it was about around that time that I went to my board of directors. I had also just moved into the CEO role, which was unhealthy for everyone. I had been the founder and executive director. And I just said, I need a sabbatical. I have got to find Jesus. And I don't know if I'm going to return. And so I took 110 days off, um, which was another very transformative period for me because so much of my life and community was tied up in the organization. I didn't really have any friends outside of donors and volunteers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when something starts in your garage, 15 years ago, it just becomes, it's beautiful and it's organic, but it also becomes like your leg, right? It's like a part of you.
Identity, yeah.
Yeah, it's so much of my identity. And I don't think I realized at the beginning of the sabbatical that I did not know who I was, but it
Mm.
was pretty quick into or I had forgotten. I think I'd forgotten who I was. Um, I, I went into the sabbatical knowing that how pivotal and important it was for me to figure out a way to find Jesus again, which sounds crazy when you're a Christian leader who can't find Christ. Um,
Mm.
but I think it's way more common than we realize, um, because I knew how to do all the things to find Christ. Um, but you have to quiet the noise and
Mm-hmm.
you have to sit in your pain. And that's what I did, for days after days after days. And I had panic attacks, and I got into counseling, and I got a spiritual director, and I learned to process everything I'd shoved down. Um, which I think, when you're running at a pace that, I've had people ask me, like, what would you have done differently? And it's really hard to answer that because
Mm-hmm.
it takes so much to start something. Um, but there is this letting go. I mean, that's what be still means. It means let go. And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't let go if I wasn't being still. And so God really, I mean, I felt like he was prying each finger off of the organization. And I had this really incredible experience with the Lord about 3 weeks into my sabbatical. I mean, this is funny, but it's not funny. But the first day I broke my foot of my sabbatical. And my husband was in Egypt for 3 weeks with an organization, and my kids were all in college. And talk about slowing down. I couldn't drive. I just would hobble around my house. But we had um, this beautiful land behind our house, and I went outside and I just sat out there for hours and hours and hours. And it was like a true emptying myself. I knew that there was something deep in me that God had spoken that I could not hear, because every time I would sit in his presence, all these things would surface that I hadn't dealt with. And I would just get up and go do something else, right? Because it's not fun. Like, we don't want to
Mm-hmm.
feel. What I didn't realize is that Jesus was with me in that. I wasn't alone, and
Mm-hmm.
he was beckoning me and calling me into that silence and solitude with him. And the more I did, the more I was able to do, until I wasn't afraid anymore, which it sounds so pathetic to be afraid to be alone. But I mean, I think that's the curse of our culture, right? We don't ever have to be alone again. We can take our phones to the bathroom with us. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
don't have to disconnect if we don't want to. And the enemy certainly doesn't want us to. And so, um, I mean, hours of weeping and crying and processing and talking to God, and like wrestling with, what if I don't go back to work? Like, what else would I do? What do I want to do? Like, I was a writer that started a nonprofit kind of accidentally, and here I am 15 years later, and I don't even know what my life would have been like if I hadn't done that. And is that what God has for me? And what do I have to offer? Just all this wrestling. And I finally got to the end of it where I had nothing left to say, which took a very long time. I know God was like, and, just like, come on, you can do this. Um, and I finally just said out loud behind my house in the woods to nobody, but I said to God, I don't know who I am. If I don't do this, I don't know who I am. And it's just saying that even now, just like I was sobbing when I said it, because that's such a vulnerable thing to say. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know who I am. And immediately I felt like the Holy Spirit just responded and was like, you are my child. You are a daughter of the King, and that's all you have to be. You don't ever have to do anything else for me again. You don't have to perform, you don't have to achieve. And in that moment, I just felt so loved by God. And I remembered, who I was in him. And later on in the sabbatical, as I just continued on that journey, um, I felt an invitation. I really felt like the Lord was like, you can do what you want. You're going to glorify me, whatever path you choose. Um, but if you want to go back to work, I would like for you to lead in a different way. I would like you to model what it looks like to sit with me, because I had not done that. And um, when I went back to work to have a meeting with my operations person to tell her what had happened in me, and like rest, because she was like, are you even coming back? And I'm like, I don't know, let me tell you
Mm-hmm.
what's happened. But the minute I walked in this beautiful building that all of these incredible women serve and work in, I literally saw it as a hospital. And instead of us being the frontline responders, which we are, um, as an organization that serves vulnerable people, we were the patients.
Mm-hmm.
I saw my coworkers as like the walking wounded. And it's like showing up to a fire with an empty tank. They just had nothing left to give. And
Mm.
so I really felt like God was like, sit with me and model what it looks like to sit with me. And, um, and so I slowly returned to work, sat with every employee, apologized, confessed my sin of overwork and unbelief, um, and running a race at a pace that was not sustainable, modeling that. You know, it's hard because you get praised for that,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't matter if it kills your soul. And so,
Right.
um, I started teaching spiritual formation classes every Wednesday. I've done that for 2.5 years now to my staff, and it's a big part of what we do, our culture. Um, and just wrote a book on it that will come out next October, um, on intimacy with Jesus. But it really is an opportunity for all of us to, an invitation for us to turn down the noise and ask God what He is speaking to us, because um, I think we just stop listening. I think He's talking to us if we'll listen.
Mm-hmm. So it takes a level of, I want to say it takes a level of self-awareness to even recognize that burnout was taking place, but
Mm-hmm.
that may not even have been your experience. And this is maybe more true of what I've seen and experienced myself, is it takes, like, we want to probably because of our pride say it is a level of self-awareness that allows us to recognize that we're in a tough spot, we're on the verge of burning out. But really, at the end of the day, we usually run into some type of suffering or pain or some
Mm-hmm.
moment in our journey
Mm-hmm.
where it
Yeah.
we realize the level of our brokenness. So is that how you would define what happened to you? Like, it was just it just came to a breaking point. It wasn't necessarily, I mean, you did have a level of self-awareness because you recognize, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I can't keep
Mm-hmm.
doing this. I can't keep running this race like this.
Yeah, I think that's a twofold answer for me. First, I think other people see your burnout before you do.
Mm,
I think when you are a passionate leader, if you are unchecked and you are not intimate with God, you are running over people.
mm,
And so I think other people knew I was unhealthy before I did. So the self awareness, I think, is acknowledging that and accepting it, right? And not
mm-hmm,
being defensive about it. Um, and so, yeah, there was definitely that. There's brokenness in that, and pride and a self reliance. I mean, I think self reliance could be one of the biggest barriers to life with Jesus, right? Like, we've
mm-hmm,
got it, we're good. And then you throw in self deception that even thinks we're good.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I think the Holy Spirit, I mean, Revelation 3 says that Jesus is standing at the door of our heart knocking.
mm-hmm,
Um, but if we don't slow down enough to hear, you know, to hear it, to quiet the chaos in our heart and our head, we're not going to hear it. And so, um, there were signs along the
mm-hmm,
way. They weren't gross sin. It wasn't, I wasn't doing anything immoral, but I was on my phone too much,
mm-hmm,
um, I was distracted. Um, I wanted to control the, the outcome.
mm-hmm,
My load, which I would equate to a calling, was a burden, and I was not carrying it well. I was like desperate to, we have to raise a lot of money every year. And I single-handedly felt like I was the only, no one cares as much as me, right? No one's going to
right,
do work as hard as me, which is, a lot of founders struggle with that. But what I realized is the suffering and pain didn't come for me until after the intimacy with Jesus. So
Interesting.
yeah, I really like when I entered my sabbatical, I would have said to anyone listening, I even said this at the time, this is a wilderness. Like I am entering a wilderness and I feel like I'm just like groping in the dark trying to find God.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess in a way it could be a wilderness, but why did Jesus go into the wilderness? He went into the wilderness to fast and pray so he could prepare to face the enemy after 40 days in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of my sabbatical, that my life fell apart, literally, and fell apart. And it would have fallen apart anyway, whether I'd taken the sabbatical or not, because it was something that happened to me. I had nothing, no say in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt the love of God so deeply, and the way that Jesus shepherded me and tenderly said, "Come away with me," because really that the sabbatical that happened for me, it was a year in the making. It was an entire year of me saying, "Oh, I think I'm burned out. I'm so tired. I need a break." Right? All of that was really the self-awareness awakening in me. Like something's not right with my soul.
Mm-hmm.
This is not life-giving anymore. I don't. I remember I went from I don't know to I don't care. Right?
Right.
Like you can't show up in a leadership meeting and I don't care. I don't care what we do. I don't. Right? Like that's a red flag. Which I didn't say that, but that's how I felt. Like
Yeah.
I don't have anything left to give. Um, but I think that's why we can't ignore the invitation to slow down and quiet the noise because life is going to happen and there is pain and suffering in our path because sin entered the world and
Mm-hmm.
things happen, right? And if we don't know who Jesus is before that happens, it's even more jarring and disruptive and catastrophic. I just don't know if I would have survived. I definitely don't think I would still be at work feeling the joy of the Lord if I hadn't have gone away with Jesus and learned how to commune with him. Because at the end of 110 days, he was like, I'm glad that I'm with you because I'm about to walk with you through the valley of the shadow of death. And
Mm-hmm.
you're going to know me in a way that changes everything. Um, and I don't feel like there was no punishment there or no consequence. I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
life, right? Like life happens and things are hard. But if we don't have Jesus, we don't have anything. If we don't have Jesus, we don't have anything. Um, I can safely say that no matter what is in my future, no matter what, I can let go. I can let go of everything. I don't have to hold it anymore because I trust Jesus, that he loves me enough to say, there's some big bumps in your future that you don't know are coming. And so I am going to invite you into silence and solitude with me. I'm going to heal you. I'm going to set you free. I'm going to show you how much I love you and I'm going to walk with you through it. I mean, what love of a father.
Mm-hmm.
It's just incredible.
In that season, you was that the first time you had ever experienced his delight in you, or you mentioned that you had this sabbatical process was a remembering process of who he says you are. So there was a previous time in your life
Mm-hmm.
where you had experienced his delight in you, that he
Yeah,
likes you.
I think so. But I know it in a richer, fuller way. I'm also
Mm-hmm.
like an Enneagram 1, type A, good girl.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to do the right thing. It's a thing, it's a problem. And I really struggle with like every decision, like, is it right or is it wrong? I mean, recently I was talking to my therapist and I was just like, I can't decide what to do, what's right or which door. And she was like, both. God is behind both doors.
Mm-hmm.
He loves you so much. And because she was like, what's your goal here? And I was like, to glorify him. And she was like, then you're going to do that whichever door you choose. because that's what you want to do. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like that's, but my nature is I want to do the right thing. And so even starting Mercy House felt like the right thing to do. And at the time, I had a very large, successful mom blog. I had 1 million readers a month. And it was just, blogging at the time, it was this bubble on the internet that popped, but um, it's kind of egocentric. You're just like talking about yourself, and you've got this community that are like hanging on every word. It's not redemptive. I mean, there are things that can be redemptive in it, but for me, it was not redemptive. But that's how I got invited to go to Africa with Compassion International, because they were trying to like leverage these large audiences to learn about their programs. And so for me, it was very redeeming because I came back and birthed this organization, and all these readers got to help. And probably 25% of our funding in all these years has come from that core group of readers. And so it's a very personal journey that I could never replicate. um,
Right.
and I don't think I was disobedient. I think I was trying my best to be obedient. I think, I'm older now and much wiser. I think there was a lot of pride, um, and a lot of self reliance. And now I can safely say, I mean, as of 2 weeks ago, I was like, this might be our last year. Like, I am so surrendered that I'm like, I have let go of everything. I'm still leading, still, but I am like, God, you have to miraculously, I mean, we're doing all the work that we are called to do, and then we're letting it go. And there's no
Mm-hmm.
worry, there's no control, which is a very different posture for me. Um, and then I'm still wildly surprised when he shows up. And I've seen that in the last couple of weeks where God's like, and I'm going to do this and this and this. And where so much that I'm like, okay, our organization we're good for another year now. Like, we can continue to do this. But not knowing that in the past would have driven me to so much fear and worry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like, if this isn't what God has for me, He has something better for me. I really believe that, because He's walked with me through everything, and I trust Him.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
I, the idea of suffering, and you mentioned Jesus meeting you in the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently wrote a script for our YouTube channel and a blog article, Substack article on this idea of Jesus meeting in our suffering. For some reason, that topic has been a topic of discussion a lot lately for me in personal relationships and work relationships. And so I've just been exploring that idea. So it's funny that we're having this
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And the idea that I started to explore was in my mind, and I've grown up in the church, like that's part of my story. Um, yeah, Jesus meets us in our suffering. But when I would envision that, he was just in the room as
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
as a as someone who's just watching it happen. Like he's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
stepping into that place,
Yeah.
but he's just in the room. And as I
Mm-hmm.
thought about that, I was like, man, that's kind of, if that's the case, if I'm going through whatever I'm going through, whatever that suffering looks like, and it's different for everybody, and he's just standing there watching in the room, that's kind of crude. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's not the posture I think that he takes. I think that
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
more than just stepping into our suffering and being there with us through it. Um, what he wants us to understand is that he's experiencing that suffering with us, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
did you, as you went through that experience, did you
Mm-hmm.
experience that a bit?
100%. Um, yeah. I mean, it's hard to describe.
Mm-hmm.
And I I find it hard to describe intimacy with Jesus. Um, that it's more satisfying than any human relationship I've ever had. Um, I feel more known, more loved. Um, the withness. That,
Mm.
right? It's like, I think I understand praying without ceasing for the first time in my life. Um, and reorienting myself every hour of the day to remember that Jesus is with me, fixing my eyes on him. Um, he he wants to experience everything with us. And the intimacy of that, like being known in that way, it's the best friend I've always wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the family I've always wanted. It's it's every relationship I've ever wanted available
Mm-hmm.
without judgment, without condemnation. Um, I heard a woman say the other day that all the wrath of God that he had for sin was poured out on Jesus on the cross, and he has none left. It's only love. That's what he has for us now. All the love. I mean, God is love, and the wrath of God was poured out on Jesus on the cross for our sin. And he doesn't look at me and say, I wish you could do better or try harder or how disappointing, right? It's like when you have a child that is taking their first steps and they fall, and you're not like, dumb baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, yay, you took 2 steps, right? Like you're cheering, the whole room erupts, you're so excited. That's how God feels about me. That's how he feels about you. That's life changing.
Mm-hmm.
When we can really, what Ephesians 3 says, have the knowledge to understand the the depth of God's love for us, right? Like it's life changing. And so, I mean, suffering is a portal without a doubt, um, into the presence of God if we allow it to be. It can also be a
Yep.
portal into, becoming a really angry, bitter person.
Mm-hmm.
We have a choice. Um, we don't want to choose the suffering, but it comes in our way, in our path. And Jesus is near the brokenhearted. And so, I mean, I literally had these experiences with God where I felt like he was like wiping the tears from my face,
Mm-hmm.
like sitting with me. And someone asked me, um, when they knew the details of my situation, they were like, why are you not furious with God? Like, where is the anger? Um, and in this situation, in my situation, which we all have our unique stories, what happened to me broke God's heart first before it broke my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so in that choice of a person, um, that broke him, like that broke God's heart,
Mm-hmm.
because he loves people and he doesn't want us, you know, living sinful lives. And so sin breaks the heart of God. And so instead of feeling mad at God, I felt comforted by him because I knew that he knew exactly what I felt. Jesus knows what betrayal feels like. He knows what sickness feels like. He's endured every ounce of suffering that could come our way or will come our way. So yeah, we can be mad at him, or we can let him comfort us because he knows the pain. He knows what we've been through because he has walked it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Henry Nouwen earlier. You're speaking spiritual formation heroes, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I just finished a book by Judith Haugen, I think, Transformed
Okay.
into Fire, and she talks
Mm.
about um, brokenness. There's a whole section on brokenness that was uh, really eye-opening for me, and that this idea that it's completely countercultural to how not only how we lead in our culture, like that's one thing, but how we lead in the church, and
Mm.
and within ministry leadership. And so this idea that it is how she talks about it is more effective to lead from a complete and utter understanding of our brokenness. And that is where Jesus gets to really show up and shine, when we
Mm-hmm.
function out of that
Yeah.
right understanding. And so it sounds like that's the
Mm-hmm.
point in which you got to. And
Yeah.
now applying what you've learned through that experience
Mm-hmm.
to your leadership within the organization, how has that
Mm-hmm.
affected how you lead your team? And
Mm-hmm.
you've talked about it already a little bit, but I'd
Yeah.
love to hear more, like what that looks like practically.
Yeah. I mean, I don't ever want to leave the secret place, first of all. Like, what is that old Eureka saying? Like, I struck
Mm-hmm.
gold or whatever. Um, I am naturally a striver. Surrender is really hard for me, people like me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's hard for everyone.
I
Um,
relate to that.
yeah,
Yep.
for humans. Uh, and so I don't even despise or regret the pain. Um, I wish I had a different story, but there's so much redemption in it, that I don't want to move away from God. I know He won't move away from me. And so practically, um, I feel like this is done in community. It's really hard to live out what we're talking about alone and in
Mm-hmm.
isolation. I think um, community and it offers vulnerability and accountability. And without it, it's very dangerous because we don't know when we're being deceived.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I feel like I have a community of believers that are my coworkers because we've all chosen to work at a faith-based nonprofit. So, you know, today we spent an hour together reading Advent scriptures in the middle of the workday. And like, I have this incredible freedom and opportunity that a lot of people don't have. Um, we also do really hard things and deal with the most chaotic catastrophes you can imagine. Um, but I think it's just like slowing down. We actually did this for one of our quarterly meetings, named like 25 ways our organization had slowed down this year. Um, and really choosing to live counterculturally as a ministry. And that's like how many emails we send, at the end of the day, all our primary job is to live a life that glorifies God. And we can't do that if we are running at a breakneck speed.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're going to miss people if we do that. And so this intentional effort to slow down, it starts in every way. We don't have meetings on Friday. We start every meeting with a feelings check. Like, what are you bringing into the room? We changed our impact statement for the whole organization. Instead of like a metric and this big number of impact, we changed it to Luke 15. Let's see the one hurting person in front of us, because the shepherd knows where to find his sheep. So, it is turning us inside out. And it's now in the fabric of everything that we do. But it's been it's taken several years to really create this culture that we're putting God first as an organization. And it's been challenging this year because any organization that serves vulnerable people groups in 2025 has faced a lot of challenges. But even in that, we know that God cares about the vulnerable more than we do. And woe to people who don't care for the vulnerable. We just have to read Deuteronomy, where 22 times it says, remember the vulnerable in the book of Deuteronomy. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because God heard the cries of the vulnerable and punished the wicked. We're on the side of what God is doing, and it's good and it's hard. We can't afford not to sit with him. And so we take clarity breaks. Everyone gets an hour built into their schedule to take a clarity break. Go sit. We practice silence and solitude. We practice Sabbath in community. really taking the spiritual disciplines and like, how do we live that out? Because we
Hmm.
can't do it in isolation. Personally, I'm in a small group of women that's like a spiritual direction small group. So we're confessing our sins to each other regularly. We're holding each other accountable. We're helping discern God's voice in each other's lives, like not with advice, but just prayerful listening.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, a lot of practical ways to live this out.
That's good. Yeah, and later in that book I mentioned earlier, she talks about what she calls mindful availability,
Hmm.
like this idea of being present in the moment with whoever is standing in front of you, or
Mm-hmm.
just with Jesus if it's just you. Um, and so that, yeah, that, I mean, that idea has just been on my mind. Like, where's my, Kurt Thompson talks a lot about attention, uh,
Mm-hmm.
paying attention to what we are paying attention to. It's one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite
Mm-hmm.
phrases that he uses. Um, uh, One of the things that you said, I think, is really important to zero in on, and that is the community aspect. Because the spiritual formation movement, um, that's one of the things that's interesting about it. There's so much emphasis on silence and solitude and prayer, and it can lean individualistic if we're not careful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have a buddy that runs a ministry called Soil and Roots, and he would argue that this this formation process is the takes place, the becoming, having our character formed more into Jesus than we were yesterday. Like that formation process happens most significantly inside of community. And um, his wondering is have we placed too much emphasis on
Mm-hmm.
these practices and gone away from doing this inside of community. Um, and I think it's right. I mean, that's been what you shared already, has been your
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Yeah, I think it's both. I don't think it's an either
Right.
or because community can also be a distraction. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I was first teaching about silence and solitude, one of my team members, who's probably the biggest extrovert I've ever met, she was like, "Ooh, that sounds fun. I'm going to do it with a buddy." I'm going to do silence and solitude with a buddy. And I was like, I think
Wait a
Jesus
minute.
should be your buddy. But because she was just like, I don't want to do that by myself. Like, I don't like being by myself.
Yeah,
Um,
talking about that fear of being alone.
yeah, yeah. So I think we have to go through that. We have to. Um, but once we go through it, hopefully we're walking right into community so that we
Mm-hmm.
can reflect with our community what God has done and then what we struggle with, you know, thereafter. Um, the enemy does not want us in community. He wants us alone and isolated
Mm-hmm.
because he is really busy distracting us, numbing us, and trying to deceive us. That is his goal. And we can't always tell when that is happening to us. And we need community to help point it out and to
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, what you said the other day, I'm concerned about, or, you stopped attending XYZ. So I do think it's a both and. Which, for me, community has been really tricky because when I started this organization, I had incredible community. And in a way, I feel like I gave my community to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then to create some boundaries and health for me, because you don't want everyone texting you all night long about your job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I backed away from community. So it's been really hard to navigate that. And I've really worked on it since my sabbatical, like hobbies and things outside of my job and people outside of my work and prioritizing my own self-care in that way, where I don't have to like mentally process, what category do you fit in my life or my work. So that's kind of a unique problem to someone who is in my shoes, but we all have. challenges when it comes to
Hmm.
community. But and community is messy. Oh my goodness. It's, and usually you got to go through the mess to get to the rich part of community. You got to have
Hmm.
that conflict. You got to get on the other side of it. But we kind of are quitters in our culture. We're like, I don't like the way that made me feel, so I'm just not ever going back. Or we don't agree, right?
Right.
Like we don't agree, and I want to live in an echo chamber where everyone thinks exactly like I do, which is equally dangerous. And so, um, yeah, solid, diverse community helps us not do that.
Hmm. Let's go back to the impact piece. As you have applied this within the organization and started leading in this way, um, what would you say to other ministry leaders? Because I mean, I think we're approaching somewhere around 200 episodes on this show. I've had ministry leaders like yourself. I've talked to a lot of ministry leaders in the space, and I mean, it's almost epidemic. The
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
this this struggle with burnout and
Hmm.
um, leading organizations from a behavior and a culture of doing rather
Hmm.
than being, um, and so it is all over the place. What would you say to organization leaders, ministry leaders who would say, okay, yeah, but like we need to show impact. We need to show that what we are doing is actually
Hmm.
to our donors, to those that might volunteer to it, like whoever it is, as you have applied what you're talking about to how you lead your team and how you lead your organization. And really at the end of the day, it's a leaning on Jesus to lead this
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
give him control and
Yeah.
take control out of your hands, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what's happening here. What has happened to the organization as you have let go?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question because this isn't a free pass not to work hard or to be
Right.
like, God's got this. Like, that's so offensive to people who are like busting it, right? Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, God has it, but you got to do the thing. Um, I feel like what happened in our organization kind of at the same time, which they have helped, one is like helped the other, is in 2022 when we lost our building, it made our organization vulnerable, for obvious reasons. And we had like a chaplain meeting with our staff for counseling. We set up a 10,000 square footprint in a wing of a church that let us have free rent until we could figure out what to do. It was just awful. It's like, we became vulnerable. Um, the leadership team that I had, we we also became vulnerable and just really fragile. And we are like, we're not going to withstand this. So while we were trying to figure out what to do, we began implementing a system. We didn't really have the resources for this. It was a huge step of faith, but it's called EOS. It stands for
Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Yeah.
And so it's an accountability, problem solving system that's very effective. A million, nonprofits and businesses use it. Um, and so we're implementing that at the same time that we're trying to get back on our feet. And then once we had done, started the implementation, we moved into a new location. That's when I was like, I'm burned out. I'm burned out. So all of that's kind of happening simultaneously, um, which I can see now as God's, like he was using all of it because we've never had clear numbers, measurables, clarity of vision, 1 year, 3 year goals, like all these things that EOS equipped us to have as an organization. We got $500,000 in grants last year. Like we're legit. Like we're a real functioning 501c3. We're proud of what we've accomplished. We have outcomes. We have, you know, um, all the program measurables, proof of
Mm-hmm.
effective programming. At the same time, there's this gigantic faith component and surrender. So it's
Mm-hmm.
both, right? It's like We're doing everything we know to do. We have core values. We hire and fire by them. We do quarterly, we do all the things that a real company, real ministry does, that to be as healthy as possible. And then we also are like, we've done everything that we can do. Now we wait on Jesus. It's really hard to strike that balance,
Mm-hmm.
but it is possible. And my strategy now, I mean, you know, I like to think I have strategy, but a lot of it is sitting at the feet of Jesus. A lot of it,
Mm-hmm.
because that is the best use of my time. And if a donor has didn't like that, I would encourage them to join me at the feet of Jesus. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you, because the pressure to like do the right thing, and I'm speaking from a nonprofit standpoint where we're raising a lot of money, and so it's like, who do I talk to? Who do I go to? How do I leverage this gift? Like all this just constant. At the end of the day, if I can show people what it looks like to sit with Jesus, let me just model this. Let me sit
Mm-hmm.
with you and have this conversation that we're happening. Let me tell you what I'm doing that's working. Let me tell you what my struggles are and invite you to do that with me. Then God's going to speak to you. And if you
Mm-hmm.
have the resources to support the organization that I'm running, I'm going to invite you and you're going to say yes. If not, we all have seasons where we can give and we can't give. But I was praying for a very specific amount of money last week. And I had done everything I knew to do, literally. Sent all the emails Giving Tuesday, and I was just like, here I am. We need this money. A woman emailed me, and she was literally, the first line of her email was, and it was this past Thursday, God kept bringing this one number to mind, and he told me to give this to your organization. And it was the same number. She was being obedient. I did not go to her and ask her for that specific amount, but God knew what we needed. And he is the chief strategist, right? If we know how to listen to him, we can surrender, but we have to be listening to him and we have to model what that looks like. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's not a cop out to not do our job. I still have to send the emails and sit with the people, create the graphics, or, I actually don't create them, but tell my team
Right.
to create the graphics. Then I have to present them to a donor. I still have to do all of those things. But at the end of the day, it is not up to me. And if I've done everything that I know to do and it ends, I have been faithful.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been a wild ride and it's been an honor of a lifetime. But I don't want to do anything God doesn't want me to do. So if I'm done, what's next? I mean, that's the posture. It's the only way I know how to have joy in the middle of such uncertain times, um, and honestly, just a hard job. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the posture lends itself to trust, right? Like I trust that God is going to do what God says he can do. I have seen enough miraculous provision to believe that it is not up to me. I don't have the answers, but I know who does. And so why wouldn't I spend my time talking to him and listening to what he has to say?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's something that, I, you know, if faith-based organizations and churches aren't doing that and Christian leaders aren't doing that, how scary, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're the ones who should be asking God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my last question, and then I'll let you go. One of the things that you said early on about identity and remembering who God says you are, that idea has been, I mean, for us as a ministry, that is core to what we talk about and teach and try to implement in our strategies and how we come alongside organizations. What does it look like to apply storytelling in all facets of
Mm-hmm.
ministry, not just Marcom, but what does it look like for storytelling in spiritual formation, in leadership development, in our disciple making practices? What you said was it just hit the nail on the head that this idea that God is inviting you to remember who he already says that you are, that
Mm-hmm.
theme you see all throughout Scripture, especially Old Testament. He's constantly inviting Israel to remember who he has already said that they are.
Yeah.
Right? The Exodus starts with names. What's it? The Hebrew Shemot, I think, is the word that they use. It literally means names. He's starting by saying, "This is who I have said you are. I've set you
Mm-hmm.
apart as a holy and set apart nation." And these constant calls to remember, that is the storytelling process. That is a theme that runs throughout the entire biblical narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying, um, one, I think it helps us. The reason he invites us to do that is because it helps us remember the identity that he has already given us. We don't have to make up identity.
Right.
We don't
Right.
have to try to craft it on our own.
Yeah.
Like, he has given us an identity, and he's asking us to remember the identity he has already given
Mm-hmm.
us from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so as you guys how have you guys implemented that idea of storytelling and remembering your identity in all areas of ministry? Because it seems like, and it sounds like, you guys are applying this in every facet of the organization, in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
leadership development, in your disciple making and spiritual formation. I'm sure it's happening in your marketing and communications. Like, what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this answers it, but I think forgetting is so dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
um, in every area, right? Like, being forgetful isn't going to help anyone. And I think connecting, we serve vulnerable people. That's what our organization does. Reminding us, reminding me, reminding you, donors, volunteers, shoppers, whoever, that they are vulnerable without God. That's all a
Mm-hmm.
part of our story. That is the gospel message. That's
Mm-hmm.
why we are called to remember the vulnerable, because if we forget the vulnerable, we forget that without God, we are in the margins. Like, we don't,
Mm-hmm.
without God's help, we don't have anything. I mean, it doesn't take very long when you work with refugees who have more education than you do, speak 10 times more languages than you do. Overnight, their lives changed, and now they're your neighbor, and they're working the night shift at CVS because war came to their country. Overnight, their life changed. They became vulnerable. When we remember the vulnerable, we remember ourselves, our own story. And so, this idea of storytelling, and I mean, God is writing this incredible story. And if we forget it, if we forget what he's done, that's why he tells us to put the Ebenezer stones, like, build the altars, write it on
Mm-hmm.
your forehead, write it on your hand so that you don't forget. And I think the enemy wants us to forget. He wants to lull us away. What Hebrews, I think it's Hebrews 2, talks about. He wants us to drift away from the anchor that is Jesus. Like, we're prone to drift.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't fix our eyes on Jesus, we're going to move away from the central story. We're going to write and live out our own stories. And that's dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where we're our own God and we're self-reliant and we've got this. But he's inviting us to be a part of this big story. And so um, it's a really natural bridge for us because, um, for years and years and years, when I speak on behalf of our organization, I remind people that caring for the vulnerable isn't a calling for a select few, it's a command for every believer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're invited into that. And so, uh, connecting that to our own vulnerability and how overnight, and I'm living proof of that. I mean, 2 years ago on March 5th, my life changed overnight, completely overnight. Where I live, um, everything changed. And I moved into more of a vulnerable season, and I had no idea that was coming. And so we're not immune to pain and suffering. And if we believe God is sovereign and he's writing our story, um, then there's opportunity there to remember other people's stories.
Mm.
Yeah.
Kristen, this has been good. If people want to learn more about Mercy House Global, how can they get a hold of you guys?
Yes, mercyhouseglobal.org. We have everything there. Yeah.
Where can we find your books?
KristenGWelch.com.
Awesome.
Just my name.
Can I pray for you as we wrap up?
Would love that. Love that.
Father, thank you so much for this conversation with Kristen. Thank you for the work that you're doing through her and her team and this amazing ministry, just stepping into the gap for the vulnerable, Lord. We know that that's your heart, and we thank you that they have answered that call to walk in partnership with you in that work. I pray that you would bless the ministry, that you would continue to provide what they need, and that they would be a safe place and a resource for the vulnerable, Lord. We know you have a heart for the vulnerable, and we just thank you that we get to participate with you in that redemptive story. And let's lift up Kristen as she continues to lead the organization, that she would find new and creative ways to lead her team in the things we talked about today. I know that this is applicable for, and almost every ministry I've ever talked to struggles with this or has gone through something similar. And so I just pray that this conversation would be a blessing to other ministry leaders, but you would be with her as she continues to implement these things in her own life and in her ministry. Lord, we love you. Thank you for your invitation to partnership and co-laboring with you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Kristen,
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thank you so much for inviting me.
What Kristen shared today names something many leaders feel but rarely say out loud. It's possible to be surrounded by ministry and still feel far from Jesus. And it's possible to come home again. Her story reminds us that the life of the leader shapes the life of the ministry. When leaders slow down, ministries breathe again. When leaders release control, ministries discover joy. And when leaders return to Jesus, the work becomes holy ground again. If you sense that same tug back to the quiet place, pay attention to it. Jesus isn't shaming you, he's inviting you. Like Kristen said, the Father's delight isn't tied to your output. His love is steady, his presence is near. Before we wrap up, if your ministry is entering a season where clarity, story, or donor relationships need fresh attention, we'd love to walk with you. At Reliant Creative, our story process helps ministries uncover the story God is writing in and through them. And our major donor services help leaders cultivate meaningful, long-term generosity built on trust and shared mission. You can learn more at reliantcreative.org. Thanks for listening. May you find Jesus in the quiet place this week, and may the work entrusted to you be carried in his strength, not your own.